Hello, my name is Joseph Arndt, and I'm the music director at St. John's Episcopal Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on this tour of Schoenstein Opus 173, the chancel organ here at St. John's Episcopal Church. This organ was installed in the summer of 2018, and it replaced the previous chancel organ, which was a 1966 Moeller organ. So when I arrived at St. John's in mid-2015, I made a deliberate effort to evaluate the state of our instruments, and it was very clear that the previous Moeller organ had quite a few mechanical issues, and a surprising number, as it turned out. We were very fortunate to have a survey done by Foley Baker of Connecticut, and they do wonderful restoration work. And through that project of their survey, we discovered that there was so much maintenance and an overhaul of the chancel organ by Moeller that needed to happen that we decided the best use of funds was to commission a new instrument. We needed a new instrument, in our opinion, that would serve our liturgy and our traditions as best and beautifully as possible. Like other organs of its period, the 1966 Moeller organ had relatively weak 8-foot foundation tone. There was not a really solid bass foundation, and there were quite a few high-pitched mixtures. And I would say the louder stops were at the top of the tonal spectrum, and then the ones in the mid-range were softer, where now we have a spectrum of tone that blossoms in the mid-range and then is reduced at the top. We still have brilliance, but we really wanted clarity, and we really wanted lots of 8-foot tone that would support singing. And after all, as my colleague Adam Pajan likes to point out, orchestras have lots of violins and they have a couple flutes and piccolos. So you really want a lot of tone in the mid-range, and that's really the main thing that the Schoenstein does for us. In addition, because of the depth of our organ chamber space, we were able to incorporate what Schoenstein calls double expression. So the swell part of the chamber has an additional swell box. So there's an outer portion of the swell with shades that open, and then an additional one at the back where the high pressure reeds and strings are. So we have the most powerful stops of the organ enclosed in double expression. Like any workspace, an organist should have a beautiful workspace, in my opinion. Obviously, most of us are fortunate to have an office, but an organ console is a really important aspect of our work, and I consider it a workspace, right? So one of the things that really impressed me about Schoenstein and Company is the neat, clean, and beautiful approach they have to console design. And so we created a console control layout that had just enough pistons and just enough toe pistons, but I never feel cluttered, and everything is really easy to reach. It was important for Dr. Pajan and I to have a sequencer so that we could perform French music with that function. And we also have a grate and choir transfer over here so that the grate can become the bottom manual as opposed to the middle manual where it normally is. And I really love the craftsmanship and the materials that have become a hallmark of Schoenstein and Company. The keys are very smooth, the action is very pleasant, the materials, as I said, are beautiful. The draw knobs have bone faces with ebony, and there are brass shanks here, and everything is just really beautiful. There's a burl inlay here behind the draw knobs, and so when I sit down, I feel ready to practice. And so one other sort of interesting feature, which we'll get you a close-up of later, is a Rolls-Royce master switch that we installed that controls the lights. Is this a necessity? Of course not, but why not? So the tonal director and president of Schoenstein is named Jack Bethards, and Jack has a keen interest in classic cars, and he was able to find a vintage Rolls-Royce engine switch, and we put it on here to control the lights. So on Christmas Eve, I'm able to really get the lights down low, the lamp goes off. So anyway, I encourage you to think about a lot of the subtleties for consoles, because there's nothing better than having a console that looks good, feels good, and has just enough to make your job as accompanist and leader of congregational song as easy and seamless as possible. So after this, my colleague, Dr. Pajan, will talk to you about all the different stops, and then I will play some organ pieces for you, and we will also have a tour of the chamber. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Adam Pajan, and I serve as artist in residence here at St. John's Episcopal in Tulsa, Oklahoma. By the time I joined the music staff here, it had already been decided to replace the molar with a new instrument, and Schoenstein had already been commissioned to build this instrument, which has resulted in our Opus 173 of 31 stops and 38 ranks across 3 manuals and pedal. Since there was already a very clear vision from the vestry and from Joseph about what kind of instrument needed to be provided, there was already an artistic vision in place. So Joseph and I entered into several discussions about how we might refine what was already in the works to make the instrument as successful as it could be, first for accompanying congregations, secondly for accompanying the choir, and then as a further consideration to be able to play the literature faithfully from many style periods as well. So this instrument is disposed, like I said, on 3 manuals and pedal. We have choir, grate, and swell. And one of the things that Joseph had determined early on is that he definitely wanted to have double expression in the swell, which is characteristic of the Schoenstein style. So in that way of design, the strongest and the quietest stops in the division are placed inside an expression chamber already inside the swell. So we have double control over the most powerful and the softest stops of the organ, which enables you to have some really effective transitions in registration. So I think one of the things that gives this instrument its very characteristic sound is the richness and diversity of diapason tone. So I'm going to demonstrate some of those. So in the choir, there's a dulciana, which in the Schoenstein design is more like an echo diapason. So it maintains that same sort of timbre. Followed next by the great second open diapason, which is an extension of the 16-foot double open diapason. Diapason of the swell. And the first open diapason of the grate. You notice that each has a slightly different timbre and increases in dynamic. So if we start with only the choir dulciana and add those in layers, we'll hear all of those sounds come together. Of these stops that really give the firm foundation for congregational singing, the presence of so much unison diapason tone. And so then within the great division, we have a principal chorus, 8-4-2, leading up into the mixture, which we can build off of either the second open diapason or substitute the first. And it's balanced in either direction there, but if you want the stronger or the weaker diapason tone, it still is a cohesive chorus. Crowned by a mixture then. Originally, the choir division had mutation stops at 1 3/5 and an independent 2-foot flute. But as we started to refine the choir division and transformed it into more of an accompanying division, we transferred that 2 2/3 stop into the great. So now we have principal scaled mutations in the great, which enable us to add those into that chorus and add something of a reedy sound. This works particularly well also with North German style repertoire when you want to have a bit more intensity in the chorus without adding reed stops. So if we add in the double diapason also, here we hear the 16-foot chorus in the great. It's rich without being heavy, and it's robust without being too weighty. So then in the swell, we have a 4-foot Gemshorn, which serves as the 4-foot member of the chorus, and another mixture there, which is in the double expression, so we can control its dynamics separately. So I'll start with just the 8 and 4 with the second swell closed as it opens. To mitigate just how much of that tone comes through at any given point. So those two choruses also combine beautifully together and provide the biggest backbone for the instrument. Let's talk some about the flute stops. There's a variety of flute stops both in metal and in wood and in different styles of construction. There is a unit stopped diapason up in the swell. Constructed of wood. There is a metal borden in the grate, also a stopped flute. We have an open wood concert flute in the choir. And we have a Willis-style Lieblich gedeckt, which is a narrow-scale chimney flute with a very high cut-up. It's got a very characteristic sound. A beautiful contrast. Then in the grate we have the wonderful harmonic flute, open pipes in the tenor transitioning to harmonic metal pipes, so it really gains its beauty and its richness as it ascends in the compass. We also have a metal 4-foot harmonic flute in the swell, similar style construction, but a smaller scale. In the grate, we also have an open metal flute that's tapered, a silver flute, which works equally well with the borden or the harmonic flute. Gives us quite a bit of flexibility in the way we're able to combine colors. There's also a small-scale 2-foot flute in the swell, which we can add to the 8 and 4 and have a flute chorus. Let's talk now about the string tone. So we've got a narrow-scaled gamba in the swell. And it is met with a celeste that does go all the way down to 8-foot C. This is also in the inner swell, so we can make the strings really kind of disappear. Very beautiful stops. The Dulciana that I mentioned earlier in the choir, which is like the echo diapason, has an undamaris paired with it that begins at tenor C, so we have a broader scale celeste in the choir. We can also combine these two together. Quite a bit of variety in the expression by taking full advantage of the double expression in the swell. And finally, we'll investigate the reed stops. Let's start first with the chorus reeds. We have a slightly darker style trumpet stop, a cornopian. A slightly brighter version in the grate. Hear the vowel change there in the great 8-foot trumpet. And then we've got not a chorus reed, but the crowning solo reed, the tuba, which extends full length to 16 foot as the ophicleide, and is available in the manuals, but it serves as the primary 16-foot reed in the pedal. Because it's under expression, we're able to use it often even accompanying only a small number of singers. But as it continues down into the bottom octave, into the 16 full length in wood on 15 inches of pressure, you hear just how much power it gains. Particularly providing quite a bit of fundamental in the bottom octave. So originally the choir had only one color stop, a Rorschalmai, and as we continued the revision process and we moved the mutations into the grate, it provided enough room that we were able to have two contrasting color stops. So we now have the corno di bassetto, the basset horn, which serves as the clarinet family stop. It's hard to imagine, for me, accompanying the Anglican liturgy without that very characteristic color. And we now have a flugelhorn, which serves the role really as kind of a chorus oboe. Combines beautifully with the foundations. Whereas the oboe horn in the swell has a bit more of an English horn kind of color and serves, I think, better in a solo role. And obviously works very beautifully with the tremulant. I neglected to mention the Facado earlier in the swell, which is in its own way kind of an oboe style reed in the swell, but with more presence. So it kind of bridges the gap between an oboe and a trumpet. It's extended down to 16 feet and is full length and mitered inside the double enclosure. And finally, we'll investigate some of the pedal stops. The pedal is somewhat limited, drawing most of its ranks from the manuals, but one of the great benefits of this pedal division is the full-length 16-foot open wood diapason. So once we've built up the ensembles, we add this to give quite a bit of gravity. It's a bit deceptive from the console because of its placement in the front and left part of the chamber, but because of that, it projects well into the room, and about halfway down the nave, its sound really starts to fill out and gain quite a bit of presence. So we have 16-foot stops available in each of the manual divisions that are independent, as well as the open wood and the pedal. We have full advantage with the double expression and the ability to really make full swell be quite powerful or quite controlled. And combined, it creates quite a glorious sound.
A pipe organ next to the church building is, of course, often the most significant financial investment a congregation can make. And maintenance and long-term care of a pipe organ is essential to a music program's success. And one of the things we addressed with the Schoenstein project is maintenance access. In the previous Moeller organ, you had to go into the sub-basement and climb up a fairly hazardous ladder situation, which was quite unpleasant, and accessing the organ chamber was problematic to say the least. So one of the things we did with the new project was we created access from the church space. So we knocked out an HVAC grill, which turned out to be unnecessary, and we created this access point. And you can see there are doors that give access to the chamber, and so anything you can do to make access easy on a pipe organ is incredibly important, and I'm really glad that even nowadays I feel comfortable climbing into the chamber myself if I need to. All right.
So now we're inside the chamber of Schoenstein Opus 173, and what you can see right here in the front are chests with tubes that run into the facade pipes. All of the facade pipes are speaking, and they're drawn from the great first open diapason, from the 16-foot double diapason in the great, and also partially from the pedal principal. You can see the rest of the pedal principal behind me, as well as some of the diapason bases, and behind you on the opposite side are the pipes of the great principal chorus, which are on one chest together on the lower level. And so behind us, we have immediately behind us the swell, outer and then inner expression, and then to the far side the choir, all in one enclosure. And in both cases, because of space constraints, we're double stacked, and the reeds are always on the upper level, so they're all getting roughly the same amount of air temperature that's circulating through, and then the flues are on the lower level in both cases of the choir and the swell.
And right behind me is the bottom octave of the pedal open wood. It sits happily near the wall there. It helps the pipes reverberate. And as Adam said when he was over at the console, the sound of the open wood bass pipes gets more present throughout the space as you go farther down the nave. We're now on the upper level of the Schoenstein organ chamber, and on the upper level all of the reeds can be found, and right here I am standing in front of the outer swell shades, and then Adam is standing behind the inner swell shades, and he'll talk about what's back there in just a moment. But as I said, on the upper level are all the reeds, and if you follow me through this door here, we'll see the great flutes. So they are up here. So here's the great trumpet, and then right behind me here are the choir shades, and you can see the pedal 16-foot ophicleide resonators.
We're now in the inner swell, and as I mentioned earlier, both the quietest and the loudest stops are housed in this portion of the swell. So you can see we've got shades here in the front, and just beyond them, the shades of the outer swell. Here we have the resonators of the cornopian and the fagotto, as well as the 16-foot fagotto here, which sits on the lower level and is mitered because of its height, but it's full length, as well as the top end of the gamba and its celeste, which are also on the floor because of their length. Moving through this way, then, we enter into the choir, and as Joseph mentioned, all the reeds being on the upper level, so we have the corno di bassetto and the flugelhorn, as well as the tuba, which is in spotted metal here in the treble register, and we saw from the outside the wooden resonators of the 16-foot ophicleide. What you might also recognize is that all of the open reeds, ones that aren't capped, are mitered. They're done so for two reasons. One, in the base, just to make sure they can fit underneath the ceiling, but Schoenstein also elects to have them mitered so that dust doesn't fall down inside, because dust is the worst enemy of reeds. So it helps keep them clean, as well as addresses a space concern. Then right here behind us we have the offset bases of the choir concert flute, but also we have the bottom end of the double dulciana, and you can see these extra tubes. So these are Haskell pipes where there's an additional tube that's inserted in an open pipe that enables it to speak as though it is one continuous full open length pipe, but yet it can still be housed in chambers with some space limitations.
I am standing here in front of the facade of Schoenstein Opus 173, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about our new facade and how it came to be. As I said in my introduction, the previous organ was a 1966 Moeller, and there was a nice enough wooden grill where the previous facade was, right here where our current facade is. And I think it was nice enough, but I felt it was really important for people who walk into the church space to see something new, to see a facade that would beautify our space as many historic instruments of the past do. So we incorporated some colors that can be found throughout the church. There was an artist who incorporated a cream color, blue from our stained glass, and then also a rose sort of color that comes from the ceiling panels. And I think the artist who worked with Schoenstein did a really great job of incorporating all these colors. And of course, there's also gold leaf. And one of the designers of the project incorporated this tracery, which I think adds an elegant touch. And that tracery is imitative of tracery that can be found on the altar detail. Also at the top of the case, there are quatrefoils, which can be found throughout the altar furniture. And the quatrefoils, of course, represent the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I think the facade looks like it's always been here, and I think it really adds something to the space. And for those of you who are thinking about organ projects for the future, I think having a new facade with a new instrument is a really compelling part of the project, because in addition to something new being apparent, people also hear with their eyes, and I know I sort of do also. So thank you for taking this visual tour of the facade with me. Thank you very much for joining us on this tour of Schoenstein Opus 173 at St. John's Episcopal Church in Tulsa, and we look forward to welcoming you here in person sometime in the future.